Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
My book of the summer, hugely successful for Ken Rogoff, was Our Dollar, Your Problem. I put it out last night as a summary, along with Rick Atkinson's wonderful second volume on the American Revolution. The Rogoff Revolution, as he has done with Carmen Reinhardt a decade ago and through his career, is to consider our debt, our deficit, our battle with austerity. Professor Rogoff joins from Harvard this morning. Ken, thank you so much. Congratulations on the book. Give us an anecdote, Ken, of the success of the book. I want every economics student to read it. Are they?
Oh, as people are starting to read it, they're really enjoying it. I'm getting all kinds of emails, letters, not to mention countless reviews where people have sort of been surprised that it's so fun to read.
It's great. Lisa noted that Grace Slick is in the early pages. He's got Jefferson Airplane in there early. Okay, Ken, Project Syndicate, a blistering essay, Foreign Affairs Magazine, a blistering essay. This time is different. Are we finally unraveling our debt and our deficit to crisis?
Well, in my book, I thought it would take 5 to 7 years on the current track we are. I think Trump, as you said earlier, is an accelerant. It's certainly not a sure thing. A lot of it goes around what are the underlying interest rates. If we go back to the zero interest rates, real interest rates of the 2010s up through 2022 in the pandemic, well, sure. Debt is a free lunch. I mean, you can spend and you basically don't have to pay anything. That's what all the, I call them anti-austerians, were absolutely convinced. And some very smart people, you had them on your program, followed this. I mean, there was Larry Summers' Secular Stagnation. He's very nuanced about it, to be fair. Olivier Blanchard, president of the American Economic Association, said we shouldn't look at debt anymore. Paul Krugman, wrote constantly about this. But what do you know? Interest rates have gone up. And the big question is, have we normalized, or is this just something after the pandemic? I think for many reasons, if you look at the history of real interest rates, they're probably about where they're going to be for a long time, in which case we are in trouble. So that's a long-winded answer, but it's really about interest rates, not just about debt.
I want to get this in on interest rates. Paul's got 8 questions. He wants to jump in here. But the answer, Ken Rogoff, is I'm auditing Ec 10 with Jason Furman, so I did a fancy logarithmic 30-year bond. We get to the Ken Rogoff 6% 30-year bond. Paul, late next year, like autumn of next year. Yep. Ken, do you still model a 6% yield for the United States of America?
Well, I think a 6% 10-year Treasury is more likely than a 1 3/4 Treasury that we had for a long time. Absolutely. I mean, it's very hard to predict interest rates, but I think they're as likely to go up as down.
Professor, I've been in this market for 35 years, and we've been talking about the national debt and deficits every single year, yet nothing changes. And I guess I've been told by others that say, hey, as long as people continue to buy our treasury bonds, we're okay. How do you think about that?
The question is, at what price? We've gone through this period where interest rates have gone down and down and down, and our debt, has gone up from maybe 30% of GDP in 1980 to 60% to 90% to over 120%. And the interest rates had been coming down until they didn't. Yep. And if you look at history, there have been long periods where interest rates were rising, where they're in decline. And I think they're in a period where they're normalizing. So people were too focused on debt and not looking enough at, well, what's the interest on the debt? That's what's changed.
What would you, if you were sitting in Congress and you had a couple of folks on both sides of the aisle with you, what would you suggest they do to address this issue?
Well, why don't you at least give a try to running a 2 to 3% deficit instead of a 6 or 7% deficit, while you organize. I mean, the solutions are well known. You could you improve the tax system. There are ways to make it more efficient. We don't have a very efficient system would be the understatement of the year. There are all kinds of suggestions for improving growth. But I think sort of a sober thing to do would be to at least not run what we call a primary deficit, means above and beyond the interest payments, which right now are about 3% of GDP.
Just want to drop in here with an important announcement separate from Ken Rogoff, and we're thrilled you're listening to us across the nation today and indeed around the world. And in a fractious United Kingdom, Angela Rayner resigns as U.S. Deputy Prime Minister. I'm not going to go into the nuances because I don't understand it, but there has been an uproar in the Labour Party wrapped around the Deputy Prime Minister. She resigns and also will resign various posts at the Labour Party as well. So that's breaking news in the United Kingdom. We'll have perspective for you as we can. We continue with Kenneth Rogoff. Paul, why don't you pick it up with Professor Rogoff?
So Ken, as we think about just kind of global economic growth here, and we're now in a world of tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, all kinds of barriers going up to global trade. As you step back and look at it from a 30,000 foot level, what does that mean to you for kind of global economic growth?
Well, I think near term, the growth is held up better than anyone would have guessed with all this noise going on. That's been a surprise. Now, we may find you're getting the labor data today, and it wasn't as good as we thought it was. It's hard to know what's going on. I might interject, Labor Day, Jobs Day has always been the big number because it's the most reliable number that we get sort of in real time. Maybe now and going forward, it's not going to be considered as reliable, and I don't know what we're going to look at.
Ken, I look at your book, and I want to bring this back, folks, to a summary of all the crises across Ken Rogoff's young academics. It's amazing how he shows up for a job interview in a polyester suit. How did that go, Ken Rogoff? You showed up early in the book, young Rogoff, chess guy, shows up in a polyester suit. How did that go, Ken?
Yeah, it was my Rhodes Scholarship interview, and I had just never worn a suit. I'd never bought a suit. I didn't know what it looked like. So I had this it was really beautiful colors. I looked like I was probably some kind of entertainer, and everyone else was wearing gray and blue suits. And I tie it in later to when I go to Poland playing in a chess tournament, and I'm describing how their suits are awful because they have, centralized planning. And they're looking at my suit and say, "Oh my gosh, do all Americans have such great suits?"
Ken, I look at your problem, and it speaks of crisis. Just as a general statement, and I'll let you work off it, how close are we to the collective fears of global Wall Street of August 1998, the unraveling of various EM crises, Ecuador, Mexico, and the rest, or something tangible like the IMF bailout of the UK many decades ago?
Well, there are lots of small countries in crisis, in fact, way more than in a long time. I mean, the World Bank reported that almost half the developing and low-income countries were basically in default. We have the Sri Lankas, there's always Argentina, Lebanon. I mean, there's all kinds of countries that are in trouble. I should say Argentina is doing much better now, but of course it has a very big debt problem. Those often are the canary in the coal mine for when something larger happens. If you go back to the 1983 debt crisis, that was really, the Latin American debt crisis, the lost decade. Actually, if you go earlier, before Mexico, Brazil, and everyone else, there were a lot of small countries. So when you have interest rates high, this much volatility going on, very high debt everywhere, it's, like a forest that's very dry and something can set it off. But I don't know what it would be. It would not surprise me if we did have a major country run into big problems, which could run anywhere from, a Latin American country to Japan over the coming year.
Ken, given kind of that uncertainty, global uncertainty, this Federal Reserve is really in a tight spot here, and not to mention the political pressures on this Federal Reserve. What do you make of kind of how the Fed's kind of been working here over the last several months, and maybe what it'll do over the coming months?
Well, the big call is actually not whether to take the short-term interest rate down 0.5% or 0.25% or when to do it. The big call is, where are we headed? If we're headed back to these very low interest rates, which some very smart people think, I mean, this is a debate, then they have a lot of room to cut without triggering inflation. They'd sort of be moving the market to where it should be. On the other hand, if that's not the case, which I believe, and I think by and large the Fed staff is very skeptical of the lower forever view, then they need to be cautious. It's so hard to read the data. The combination of Trump, AI, and everything makes it very hard to know what's going on.
Can comment on the arch thing, and this is, of course, working with Jorgensen at Harvard and many other giants on, I'm going to call it, folks, the dynamics of productivity. And there's a school, Ken, down the street where I think they came up with total factor productivity. I can't remember quite. But Ken, on productivity, the great theme of our liberal state is productivity and technology to the rescue. Do you observe that, or is that overemphasized?
Well, it's certainly not overemphasized. It's very important. It's sort of hard to know how to make it come and how to make it go away. I think Wall Street obviously has been very excited about AI. There are air pockets where the productivity has been very clear. I do think some of what we're seeing in the high Wall Street prices reflects labor share falling, profits and businesses share rising, which means it isn't growth. It isn't all growth. Some of it's just a reallocation that has very different political implications, of course.
Ken, congratulations on my book of the summer. I just can't say enough, folks. Whatever smart aleck kid you've got, I don't care how they're smart like Rogoff, they're dumb like Keene. The answer is cover to cover, 200 pages, Our Dollar, Your Problem. It is the arc of Ken Rogoff's career and the view forward as well. Kenneth Rogoff, Harvard University.